Hi everyone, you're watching SIT's education program, the Certificate in Health Sciences. Today on the show we're looking at the digestive and the urinary system, starting off with Craig, who's going to talk us through how our digestive system works. All right, Craig, if you could tell us the different parts that make up the system.
Okay, well, reasonably complicated kind of system. We can't see it up the top here, but we have the mouth obviously with your teeth in it, so we can break up all the layers and husks on food and so on, break it up into smaller and smaller pieces, open up some of those cell walls. Then you have all your saliva glands, which are going to put chemicals in to help break down sugars and break down starch and start the whole digestive process. And then we get into our esophagus, or our food pipe, which is just simply a way of getting from the mouth all the way down to the stomach.
So how long is the esophagus? How long does it go down us?
Well, it'll go from your mouth down to your stomach is about
sort of
mid-chest, about there, that kind of length. So it makes its way down the esophagus, or our food pipe, and into the stomach. Pretty nasty place, the stomach, fairly toxic. You have acid in there, pH of about 2. Very nasty, very nasty. And that's just going to dissolve and break down those food particles into sludge, basically.
So how big is the stomach?
Depends.
Depends on the person.
Obviously something like a baby, the stomach is very, very small, but somebody who might be morbidly obese could actually have a very large stomach cavity in there. So they come in different sizes. The more you eat, the larger you can make it.
Right.
So our stomach adds the acid in, churns the food up, turning it into a sludge, all set to be passed down into the next parts. But we have some other organs that add bits to the whole process. So we have our gallbladder here, for example. Our gallbladder helps produce bile,
Right.
which adds and helps break down fat.
Okay,
Dissolve fat.
so that's the main function of the gallbladder.
Gallbladder is to produce a chemical to help break down fat, and it's a greeny looking liquid that gets added in.
Because
So
you hear of people getting their gallbladder removed quite a bit. What causes that?
Well, some people get little stones in their gallbladder from bile, and it forms into stones. It blocks the little wee tubes in there. Very, very painful. And in some cases, the gallbladder needs to be taken out. Just means that those people have a little bit more difficulty digesting fat, so they have to be careful what they eat, because it doesn't get broken down as much. Makes its way down, because we're into the upper part of our small intestine here, probably this area up in here.
Okay.
Then we have our pancreas, and our pancreas doesn't feed directly into it, but it helps control our blood sugar levels.
So is that all the pancreas does?
It's all the pancreas does, blood sugar. And then we're into our small intestine, which is, we can see on the illustration here, you've got about 6 to 7 metres of intestine, all packed inside there, looping in and around itself.
So how come we have a small and a large intestine?
Okay, because they have two different jobs to do. The small intestine is where we absorb all the nutrients from. So we take up our iron and our calcium and all the other bits and pieces from the food tend to get done in the small intestine. And there's a lot of it because it's a fairly long, slow journey through, and we want to make sure we can get as much out as we possibly can.
How long would it take for food to pass through there, roughly?
Well, it depends on what you eat, and everybody's slightly different, but generally from mouth to out the other end, you're looking at about 24 hours to make your way through. So slowly makes its way through the small intestine, absorbing all the calcium and iron and all those bits and pieces, and we get to our large intestine. And the large intestine, generally there's not an awful lot left, and this is where we absorb some excess moisture. So water is absorbed mainly in the large intestine. Slow trip through, all the way down to the anus, feces, and it comes the other end.
Gee, there's quite a lot to it, isn't there? There's more in it than I thought there'd be.
Well, there is a lot in it because there's a lot to do. We have to break down the fat, deal with the sugar. We can't deal, for example, with fibre. The intestine can't deal with fibre, and it just makes its way all the way through.
Right. So where's this in relation to other parts of the body? Does it sort of go in behind the ribs?
No, it's all underneath the ribs. What we tend to do is we could cut it across here, and you've got your diaphragm there. So you've got all your lungs up here, pretty much, lungs up here, and this makes its way through the diaphragm, and that's our gut cavity. So our gut cavity is basically about from halfway down, and up above that, that's where all your breathing and heart is all up in here. So this is all just in the lower part.
Okay. And we know that the gallbladder can be removed. Can we survive if major problems happen to other parts of like the intestines and things?
We can have a lot taken out and dealt with. You've probably heard of stomach stapling.
I have, yes.
And what they do there basically is they either make the stomach very, very small, or they take a large part of it out. So these people have a very, very tiny stomach. So they can't absorb or can't eat a lot because then they feel really full. Your stomach's got stretch receptors in it. And when your stomach starts to stretch with food you're putting into it, you no longer feel hungry, or you feel full.
Right. How do we recognise when we are hungry? Like, how can we recognise that feeling of hunger, that we need food?
Well, that's habit, actually. If you are in a routine of, you tend to have breakfast about 7 o'clock and lunch at 12 o'clock and so on, that becomes habit. And your brain deals with that, and what your brain does is, if you look at the clock and you see it's 12 o'clock, you know that's lunchtime, it sends a signal to your stomach, and your stomach starts to empty out what it's got from breakfast and getting ready for lunch, your rumbly stomach. So when your stomach rumbles, it's your brain telling the stomach to empty out because it's just about time to eat again.
Refresh me again, what was the point of the liver, the main function of it?
Well, liver's got a huge job in the body. You can store glucose there as glycogen. It helps produce some of the chemicals for your gallbladder. It has to deal with things like drugs that come into the body, Panadol and everything, all has to go through the liver to be cleaned out.
Oh, okay.
So it links into other systems as well. You can have chunks of your large intestine taken out. Chunks of the bowel can be taken out. Unfortunately, people who get things like colon cancer often have parts of their bowel taken out, and they just join it up somewhere else.
Thank you very much for your time, Craig.
Not a problem.
Glenn, we've been looking at the digestive system. How long does it take for food to pass through the system?
Well, it depends on the type of food, really. I mean, some food can pass through the system within a few hours. Some foods actually take 24 hours, depending on the consistency of the food and type of food it is.
Gee, up to 24 hours.
Yes, it depends. I mean, for example, you have a lot of meat products and heavy proteins and such forth. It takes a lot longer for the body to break it down, so it actually sits in like a mass in your stomach before it actually breaks down.
Right. Is it easier for the body to break down, say, a meal with lots of different kinds of food, or just one sort of big bulk meal?
It depends. I mean, generally, if you think about food in the context of what it is, each food has a different structure and different protein level, carbohydrate level, such forth like that. Now, if we take, for example, one food item, your body will process a lot quicker and a lot easier because the acids that the body is producing will break it down quicker. If you're putting several components together, your body's actually putting more things in there to break it down, different structures, time frames and such forth like that.
Right, okay. So looking, we've got some food in front of us. How long would it take to, say, break down these sort of things?
Well, it depends what you mean. For example, you've got the chocolate slice there. I mean, this is wonderful, lots of sugars and things like that. It's a real quick energy boost. Your body's going to absorb that sugar straight away. It's going to burn off, but it gives you no energy. And actually what will happen if you don't burn it off, the sugar will turn to fat and it stays in your body a lot longer.
Right.
For example, sausage roll, once again, high fat content, the protein. And this will take a lot longer because the body, once again, has to process those fats, the butter's in there, and also the meat, so it's going to take a lot longer. It depends on your body's metabolism, actually the time process it'll take.
So by taking a lot longer sort of to pass through, does that mean that you'll stay unhungry for longer or something like the sausage roll?
Well, it's a bit of a debate really. I mean, people when they eat food, things with a high protein content and nutrition, actually your body feels more satisfied because getting nutrients from that product. With something like a sausage roll, I mean, it tastes good and all that, but what you get is a lump sort of sitting in your stomach. You still feel like, oh, I'm not satisfied, and you want more to eat. And so therefore, it tends to, I mean, it sits there and it actually takes longer to process.
Right.
Okay.
So something like this, it burns straight through the cake.
Yeah, well, it
Just
does.
a quick instant sort of sugar fix and that's it.
Basically, that's what it is. I mean, the same as like caffeine as well. I mean, the coffee, we have coffee. I mean, it's a rush we get from the caffeine afterwards, but really has no nutritional value. Actually, and for a coffee, for example, as a diuretic, and if you drink a lot of coffee, it actually passes through your system a lot quicker, cause your body to flush it out.
Right. Is that why they say coffee makes you dehydrated? Is that why?
Yes, it's one of the reasons, because you're actually processing a lot more, and your body's actually processing liquids and actually forcing it out. Yes.
Right. So I suppose it's not too good to have too many coffees a day then?
Well, no, I mean, we do that. I mean, it's people relying on more for just the energy, that sort of caffeine rush.
Yeah. But it's sort of not sustained for long either, is it?
No, no.
What about, we're looking at the bun over here, how long would it take something like that?
Okay, well the bun, once again, depending on the quality, it's got a lot of fibre in it. Okay, the grains in it are whole grains. The thing with the grains is that your body actually retains those grains. It actually takes a lot longer to burn up and process because haven't been treated, they haven't been broken down. And in actual fact, your body system is very good and healthy because you have a lot of fibre in there. It's good roughage for your bowel system and also for your salads. You're extracting a lot of nutrient out of it. The lettuce, the tomato, cucumber, there's a lot of vitamins in it. Your body's actually going to be more replenished by eating something like that.
Right.
Okay.
So looking at the grains, also things like porridge would be slow burning as well. That sort of, what else would be in the same sort of category?
Things like porridge, muesli, all your whole grain breads, or just I think with things like rice as well. Rice and pasta good for carbohydrates. Your body burns it off. It gives you a lot of energy and it burns slower. Okay, so it's actually a lot better for you.
Great. So from your point of view, what would be good snacks for people to sort of have in between meals that will be so burning and keep them going for longer?
Well, things like actually fruit are great snacks to have. I think
Does fruit sort of, take a while to digest?
it can do, depends on the fruit. Like, for example, banana sits in your stomach a lot longer. It actually processes a lot longer. Actually have fattening fruit. It also gives you a bit of sustenance. But it also gives you energy and vitamins. Your body needs vitamins in your system to keep it going. And that's what we look at. I mean, I'll give you an example. People eat fish like sushi or sashimi, the raw fish, in small amounts. Get more nutrient from something like that, a smaller amount of good quality fresh product, than would say a piece of meat, cooked meat.
Really?
Yeah, because you're actually extracting it out. So the difference is things like that.
Because even though it's small, it seems to keep you full for quite a long time, doesn't it?
Because it's the quality of your product. We tend to think when we eat food that we eat big masses of bulk of lesser grade product. You feel hungry, you always want more, and you feel hungry. You have quality foods like your rye grains, your pulses, rices. It actually gives you body sustenance, something to burn off all the time. And things like, you go back to snack foods, things like muesli bars are great, wholemeal buns, even in morning wheat bix. Great energy burners. It sits in your stomach, it takes a lot longer, and it gives you a lot of energy to burn off.
So what's dairy products like for our digestive system?
There can be a problem, actually. Some people are actually lactose intolerant, which means the body does not process the dairy products.
Because you hear more and more of that these days, don't you?
You do, and I think it's, I'm not sure where it's stemming from, but people have more allergies. It's actually the process of milk, what we're going through, how we're making milk. And there's even a thought process that we're actually over-processing our products. And we're not retaining the natural antibodies or bacteria in it, which actually helps our bodies overall.
So having a milk intolerance, would that apply to a lot of people with all dairy products?
Yes, it can do. I mean, dairy products we talk about from a cow. Okay. Now there's actually things being produced. We have the soya milk, okay, which is a vegetable base. Also sheep milk as well, which is more commonly already available. So people are looking for alternatives for products like that.
Right. Because you quite often hear though, yogurt's quite good, isn't it? That's quite a good dairy product to digest.
Yogurt has culture put into it, or certainly has natural cultures in there. Also, we can actually incorporate called acidophilus and bifidus. Right? Very good for intestine, your stomach. It actually helps to cleanse it. Actually, put microorganisms back into your system. It actually means it's one of the most beneficial and healthy things for stomach illness or maybe food poisoning or operations, that they give this to the acidophilus bifidus afterwards.
Right. Thank you, Glenn. We really are what we eat, aren't we?
Oh, we are indeed. Yes, yes, that's
Thank
true.
you.
Welcome.
We're now going to take a look at the urinary system with Dr. Umar. Dr. Umar, what parts make up the urinary system?
Urinary system has got three main parts, the two kidneys on each side, the ureters, which are the tubes which bring in the urine down to the bladder, and the bladder, which is the storage system of the urine.
Right.
It's a very unique system. As you know, you've got different parts in our body, and each part has got a unique function. The brain, for example, is the bit of our mind. We need it. The heart, which is the pump for the circulation. The lungs is for the oxygen, and the liver is for the chemicals and the energy the body needs. The kidneys' main function is to get rid of the waste products from these organs, so it keeps the system going on.
And how does it do that?
Well, it's better to know what's the structure of the kidney and how it works before we could understand how it does this.
What do the kidneys do?
Yeah, to understand the function of the kidneys, we should know some anatomy and physiology about it. Basically, the kidneys are bean-shaped organs, each about the size of a fist.
Okay.
They are located near the middle of the back, just about or below the rib cages. And your kidneys are sophisticated reprocessing machines. Every day, they produce about 200 liters of, or process 200 liters of blood to sift out 2 liters of waste products and extra water.
Gee.
The waste and extra water becomes urine, which flows to your bladder through tubes called ureters. The bladder stores urine until you go to the bathroom. The actual filters or filtering occurs in a tiny units inside your kidneys called nephrons. Every kidney has about 1 million nephrons.
Gee.
And in the nephron glomerulus, which is a tiny blood vessel or a capillary, it intertwines with a tiny urine collecting tube called a tubule. In general, your kidneys can adequately function with only 1/3 of the normal number of nephrons. A complicated chemical exchange takes place as a waste material and water leave the blood and enter the urine system. And there are 5 or 6 main basic functions of the kidneys.
Okay.
We gone through the first one, which is formation of the urine. The other ones is excretes metabolic waste products. We go in details with these ones later. The third one is balances solute and water transport. The fourth one is conserves nutrients. The fifth one is regulates acid-base balance. And the final one is secretes hormones that help regulate blood pressure, red blood cell production, and calcium metabolism.
Gee, they certainly do a lot. Could we have a few more details?
Certainly, yes. To start with, it's toxin removals, and this is really amazing. The wastes in your blood comes from a normal breakdown of active tissues and from the food you eat. Your body uses the food for energy and self-repair, and after the body has taken what it needs from the food, waste is sent to the blood. If your kidneys didn't remove these wastes, the wastes could build up in the blood and damage the body. Many drugs are either broken down and or removed in the urine. For the electrolyte balance, at first the renal tubules we were talking about before receive a combination of waste materials and chemicals that the body can still use. Your kidneys measure out chemicals like sodium, phosphorus, and potassium and releases them back to the blood to return to the body. And in this way, your kidney regulates the body levels of these substances.
So, is the balance important in our bodies?
It is, of course. In order for cells to function properly, the concentration of electrolytes in the blood need to be tightly controlled. And there are some important electrolytes, we need them controlled in a specific range. For example, sodium is very important for the brain and the nerves. Potassium for the heart, muscles, and nerves. Calcium for heart, muscles, nerves, and bones. Magnesium for the heart, muscles, and nerves. And phosphorus for muscles and bones. Regarding the fluid balance, the body is constantly gaining fluid from the diet and losing it either through evaporation, urine, or stool.
Right.
Too little fluid and you become dehydrated. Too much fluid and you swell up and cannot breathe.
So how long does it take to pass through the system?
It takes few hours to few days. Some chemicals needs to be taken out the system within hours, and some of them they can wait for days or weeks. But at the end, they need to be taken out. Otherwise, they'll be accumulated in the body and they will hurt the body. There's another example of these chemicals is the blood acidity. And for example, a protein structure in our body, which is the unique structure in our body, which forms like hormones, enzymes, and other things. This protein structures and function is very sensitive to the changes in acid concentration. And you need the kidneys to remove the extra acid through the body makes it. Otherwise, the protein won't be function properly.
Kidneys have a pretty important job, don't they?
It is indeed. In addition to removing wastes, kidney release 3 important hormones: renin, erythropoietin, and vitamin D. You need renin for the blood pressure, erythropoietin for production of red blood cells, and vitamin D to strengthen your bones.
So why do kidneys fail?
Well, most kidney diseases attack the nephrons, which is the functional unit of the kidney, causing them to lose their filtrating capacity. The damage to nephrons may happen quickly, often as a result of injury or poisoning. But most kidney disease destroy the nephrons slowly. Only after years or even decades will the damage become apparent. And the most common 2 diseases are high blood pressure and diabetes.
Okay. What happens if your kidneys fail?
If your kidneys stop working completely, your body fills with extra water and waste products, and this is a condition called uremia. Your hands or feet may swell, you will feel tired and weak because your body needs clean blood to function properly. Untreated uremia may lead to fits or coma and will ultimately result in death. And if your kidneys stop working completely, you will need to undergo dialysis or kidney transplantation.
Gee, that sounds pretty drastic, doesn't it? Thank you very much, Dr. Omar. You've certainly answered all my questions.
Thank you very much.
Bev, what are some of the problems that can occur within the urinary system?
There are problems with the production of the urine side, and that's not an area I have so much to do with. I work as a continence advisor, and that's more to do with the storage area, the bladder and the urethra, and perhaps the pelvic floor that supports the bladder.
Right. So what are some of the problems that can occur there?
Well, there's different types of incontinence problems. These would be when there's leakage of urine, and that could be that you could have stress incontinence, known to a lot of ladies who have leakage when they cough or sneeze or laugh.
Right, and can that be at any stage of your life?
It's more likely to happen as with the advance of age or after having children, but it certainly can happen at any stage and can actually happen to men as well as women.
Oh, right. So that's one sort. What other kinds are there?
Well, there's one that most people will recognise, and that's urgency or urgent incontinence, whereas some urine leaks. Urgency is where you get a sudden desire to pass urine and have to rush to get there.
What usually causes that?
It can be something that you learn by being very tuned into what's going on with your bladder, or it actually can be because of a physical reason, and it's not fully understood why some people have this.
Right. Can it sometimes be caused if you have a large drink in one go and it sort of hits your system at one time?
It could be, but it's more, it could be caused by that, but it's mostly people, even if they have a large drink, who don't have a bladder issue, can store the urine and not have to rush off to go.
Right. Is there any other forms of incontinence?
There are other forms of incontinence. There is incontinence called overflow incontinence, and that's perhaps where the prostate gland, which in a male is situated below the bladder, can cause some obstruction, and the bladder doesn't empty properly, and sometimes the urine will just trickle away when it's not a time that you've actually gone to void.
Is there ways we can prevent incontinence?
By having good bladder habits. For women, perhaps doing their pelvic floor exercises after they've had children, or just in general doing pelvic floor exercises. By drinking appropriate things like not too much tea and coffee, the Coca-Cola, energy drinks, they all can make that urgency worse. Having good bowel habits, and not rushing off always to go to the toilet at the very first sign of wanting to go.
Right. And what about infections? How can we tell when we've got an infection coming?
For most people, when they get a urinary infection, they'll be aware of burning and perhaps having to go to the toilet more frequently. Sometimes as people get older, they can have a lower grade infection and they don't have that burning and feeling unwell, just aware that things aren't quite as they should be.
Right. What usually causes urine infections?
Urinary infection is caused by a bacteria in the bladder. If it gets into the kidneys by travelling up the ureters, often people are much sicker and it needs to be seen by a doctor fairly promptly.
Right. And how can it be treated?
Usually with antibiotics and drinking plenty to flush it through.
You mentioned before pelvic floor exercises. What is our pelvic floor?
This is a pelvic floor, a model of a pelvis with the pelvic floor on it. Your pelvic floor supports all the organs above. That's your bladder in a woman, your womb or uterus, and the bowel. And it supports the bladder neck at the right angle to prevent urine leaking. And a lot of people can be helped who have some degree of incontinence by learning to use your pelvic floor and exercise it properly.
Right. Oh, very good. Just going back to urine again.
Yes.
Quite often there can be variations in colour. Is that due to infections, or what causes that?
The colour in your urine is mostly due to how much you drink. Often people will find in the morning it's darker. When they've had quite a bit to drink, it gets paler.
And so it's one better than the other, or?
You need to drink enough fluids to keep your urine pale. You don't want it dark and straw-coloured or brown.
Elderly people seem to have quite a few problems in the urinary system. Is it because it deteriorates?
Yes, it does with age. Bladder problems and urinary problems, just as problems with the heart and other areas of your body become more common as you get older. One area that for men particularly as they get older, the prostate gland, which the urethra carries the urine through, enlarges as men get older, and this often men will say, oh, it's just a part of ageing, but it's really important that that's checked out, because for a small proportion it can be due to a malignancy or a cancer in that prostate gland. Yeah, so they should, if they're having urinary symptoms, should actually go and see their doctor.
And perhaps if there's anyone out there and they've got any more questions or want to know anything more about perhaps incontinence or infections or other problems with the urinary system, who could they contact?
If it's an incontinence issue, their own doctor is their first point of contact. Often they'll be referred perhaps to the continence service, or investigations need to be done.
Thank you, Bev. That was very informative.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching our health science program on the urinary and digestive system. You'll have to tune in next week when we'll be looking at the reproductive and the immune system. But if you'd like more information about this course or any other offered by Sit to Learn, you can contact the team on 0800 Sit to Learn. See you then.